Hello everyone, welcome to Module 4, Lecture 2 on the solvency ratios. Today we are going to discuss about the different practical problems related to the various solvency ratios that has been discussed in the last lecture. So, to start with the question number 1, we are given the different informations from the balance sheet like equity share capital, preference share capital, reserve and surplus, debentures, long-term loans, current liabilities, fixed assets, long-term investments, current assets. And you are required to calculate debt equity ratio, proprietary ratio, solvency ratio, fixed asset ratio and long-term debt to capitalization ratio. To start with that, we first calculate the debt equity ratio as discussed in the earlier slides. Debt equity ratio is the ratio of total liabilities, your total debt upon shareholders fund. Multiply by 100 as we represent these ratios in percentage. So as per the question, we are given the different liabilities like debentures 3 lakhs, long term loans 50,000. So it comes to 3 lakh of debentures and 50,000 of long term loans, the total amounting to rupees 3 lakh 50,000 to be divided by shareholders fund, which is equal to equity share capital, which is 5 lakh plus preference of 2 lakh and reserve and surpluses 1 lakh. So total comes to rupees 8 lakhs multiplied by 100. So it comes to 43.75%. This ratio implies that the dependence of the company on equity share capital is more as compared to the debt source of financing. Moving ahead with the proprietary ratio, the formula of the proprietary ratio is shareholders funds upon total assets, where the shareholders funds, as we calculated earlier, amounting to rupees 8 lakhs upon the total assets of the company is given 7 lakh fixed assets, 1,50,000 of long term investments and current assets amounting to rupees 5 lakh. So the total comes to 13,50,000. So this ratio comes to 59.2%. This ratio implies that more than 59% of the total assets of the company are financed through the shareholders funds. Next ratio is regarding solvency ratio. Solvency ratio is total liabilities to outsiders upon total assets. Total liabilities to outsiders include debentures, long term loans plus current liabilities. The total comes to rupees 5,50,000 divided by the total assets of rupees 13,50,000 reaches the figure of 40.7%. It implies that the debt providers are just secured because of their money can be get realized because of the use of the asset, which is already more than what they are expecting from the company to pay off their liabilities on time. And the next ratio is fixed assets ratio. The formula of the same is fixed assets after depreciation upon total long term funds. So in the question, the fixed assets are given 7 lakh, and the total long term funds comes to rupees 13 lakh 50,000, and this ratio comes to 61%. Means 61% long term, or we can say the long term funds has been used up to the extent of 61% of the total assets of the company. Moving to next part, we have to discuss about long term debt to capitalization ratio. The formula of the same will be long term liabilities upon total capitalization. Long term liabilities in the question is 3,50,000 and the total capitalization is 13,50,000. This ratio comes to 26%. It implies that the company has more reliance on equity source of capital for financing its different assets. Moving to the question number 2. The question number 2 is the net profit after tax of a company is 2 lakh rupees and the fixed interest expenses on debt is 25,000. The tax rate is 50%. Calculate the interest coverage ratio. So for question number 2, we are given in the question is the amount of net profit after tax, which is equal to 2 lakh rupees. As we have to move backwards, so we add back the tax which is given at the rate of 50%, which comes to rupees again 2 lakhs. So the profit before taxes is equal to 4 lakh rupees, and in this we add the interest as given in the question of rupees 25,000. So we reaches the figure of 4,25,000. This is our profit before interest and taxes, or in other terms we call it EBIT, earning before interest and taxes. So the interest coverage ratio is formula is EBIT, or the profit before interest and taxes, to be divided by fixed interest charge we calculated EBIT amounting to rupees 4,25,000 and given in the question is the fixed interest charge of 25,000. It is 17 times. This ratio is to be represented in the times. So it shows that the company has sufficient profit to meet its interest charges out of the given profit. Moving to question number 3, which says the earnings before interest and taxes of a company is 15 lakhs. The borrowings at present are 10% term loans, 15% bank loan, public deposit at the rate of 12%, and in the finally the information provided is the sales are growing, and to support it company intends to go for an additional borrowing of rupees 30 lakhs. The increase in EBIT is expected to be 20%. You are required to compute the interest coverage ratio after the additional borrowings and comment on the same. So, going with this question number 3, first We go for the calculation of interest. Calculation of interest. First, we take up 10% long-term loans. The interest on the same amounted to rupees 5 lakhs. Then 15% interest on bank loans. That results into amount to rupees 4,50,000, and the last is 12% interest on public deposits, which amounts to rupees 2,40,000. So the total interest payable by the company comes to rupees 11,90,000. As per the question, we are provided the information of EBIT. So, while calculating interest coverage ratio before any changes is EBIT 15 lakh rupees divided by the total interest charges of 11,90,000. It shows 1.26 times, mean we are there to cover our interest out of our profit. And while moving to the part B, when we are going for additional borrowing of rupees 30 lakhs, and it will also add to the EBIT by 20%. So we compute with the additional information. So our new EBIT will be 15 lakhs plus 20% increase as given in the question, the total amounting to rupees 18 lakh. And additional borrowing, we expect it will be at the same, at par with the bank loan. So the interest paid on it will be 15%. So the new interest charges in addition to the old one, that is 11,90,000 plus 15% of 30 lakhs, that comes to 4,50,000. We reaches the figure of 16,40,000. So now our new interest coverage ratio is 16,40,000 to be compared with the 18 lakhs. So 18 lakh divided by 16,40,000, it comes to 1.09 times. It shows that our profit are sufficient to pay off the interest on fixed interest charges borrowings. Moving to question number 4, that is there to again calculate the interest coverage ratio from the following information. We provided with the net profit after tax, fixed interest charges on long-term loans, which is again a fixed, then the tax rate, sinking fund appropriation, and the debentures amounting to rupees 40,000. So moving to the question number 4, interest coverage ratio which is EBIT, earning before interest and taxes, upon fixed interest charges. So first we compute the EBIT as per the question. We are given profit after taxes, which is equal to 50,000. We are paying one interest to debenture holders of rupees 5,000. Then we are paying another interest on long-term borrowings, on loans, that is amounting to rupees 15,000. Tax, which is given in the question at the rate of 50%, means again a 50,000 amount. And the last is sinking fund appropriation, which is 4,000. So the total of all these items comes to rupees 1,24,000. This 1,24,000 is my EBIT, earning before interest and taxes. Now I compute interest coverage ratio, which is my EBIT of 1,24,000 divided by, as per my information, fixed interest charges are of 20,000 rupees. If I calculate this, I am reaching the figure of 6.2 times. Moving to question number 5, which says you are required to calculate the debt equity ratio, proprietary ratio, solvency ratio, fixed assets ratio, long term debt to capitalization and interest coverage ratio. I mean, we have to compute almost all the ratios that we have already discussed in the last lecture of solvency ratios. So starting with, first we compute in this question the amount of debt. Amount of debt is, we are given 7% debentures of rupees 3 lakh and long term loans at the rate of 8%, that is 50,000. So total debt will be 3 lakh plus 50,000 comes to 3,50,000. Next, we are going to compute shareholders funds, which is equal to equity plus preference plus reserve and surplus plus profit, whichever is given in the question, like equity share capital of 6 lakh, 8% preference share capital of 3 lakh, reserve and surplus of 1,20,000, profit and loss amounting to rupees 2,80,000. So shareholder funds comes to 6 lakh plus 3 lakh plus 1,20,000 plus 2,80,000. So the total amount of shareholder funds in this question is 13 lakh rupees. Computing debt equity ratio, is equal to our debts amounting to rupees 3,50,000 in comparison to our shareholders fund of 13 lakhs, and we get the ratio which is equal to 26.9%. It again shows the dependence of the company as a source of financing is shareholders fund, not the debt at all. Moving ahead to the second ratio, that is proprietary ratio, which is shareholders funds upon total assets. Shareholder funds we already calculated amounting to rupees 13 lakhs, and the total assets of the firm is comprises of fixed assets 10 lakh, long term investments 1,50,000 and the current assets amounting to rupees 8 lakhs. So the total is 19,50,000. When we compute it, it falls to 66.67%, mean 67% almost of the all assets of the company are financed through the shareholders funds. Next, in this question we have to compute the solvency ratio. Solvency ratio is total liabilities to outsiders in comparison to the total assets. When we compute this ratio, total liabilities to outsiders mean everything that is given in the question will be taken into account. That comes to the total of 6,50,000. If we see our question, where we are given 3 lakh as debentures, 50,000 as long-term loans, then we have 2 lakh creditors and bill payable of 1 lakh rupees. So the total is 6 lakh 50,000 divided by the total assets 19 lakh 50,000 into 100. The total ratio falls to 33.33%. It implies that debts are secured with regards to their payment because of the availability of the assets. Moving to the next, that is fixed assets ratio. Which is given as fixed assets divided by total long-term funds multiply by 100. So the total fixed assets in the question is 10 lakh. Total long-term funds means shareholders fund plus long-term loans, which comes to rupees 16 lakh 50,000, and it falls around 60.6%. Moving to next part of the same question, we are there to calculate the total long-term debt to the capitalization ratio. The formula is long-term debt to capitalization is equal to total long-term debts, or I can say the long-term liabilities, divided by the total capitalization of the company. Total long-term debts, as we have calculated so many times, it amounts to rupees 3 lakh 50,000, and the total capitalization of the company is 19 lakh 50,000, resulted into 17.9%, which shows that company rely more on equity source of financing than the debt source of financing. Moving ahead to question number 6, we are again to calculate in this question the debt equity ratio, proprietary ratio, solvency ratio and the fixed assets ratio. Starting with the debt equity ratio. Debt in this company is debentures 2 lakh, long-term loans is amounting to rupees 5 lakh. So the total debt falls to 7 lakh rupees, divided by the shareholders fund, that is given equity 10 lakh, preference 3 lakh and 2 lakh amounting to general reserve and surplus. So we compare this 7 lakh with 15 lakhs and the ratio comes to 46.67%. More reliability on the equity source of financing. Ratio number 2 in the question is about the proprietary ratio, which is equal to the shareholders fund upon the total assets. We have just computed the shareholders fund, which amounted to rupees 15 lakhs, and divided by the total assets, fixed assets, long-term assets, investments and the current assets amounting to rupees 25 lakhs. It comes to 60% exact. Means shareholder fund is more used by the company for financing its assets. Then we have the next in the continuation is the solvency ratio. Solvency ratio is total liabilities to the outsiders upon total assets. Total liabilities to the outsiders is 10 lakh in the question, and the total assets in the question we have already computed is 25 lakh. So it comes to 40%, which means debts are fully secured with regard to their payment by the company. Then we have the next fixed asset ratio. Fixed asset ratio, we compare the fixed assets which is given in the question 18 lakhs to be divided by long term funds which is amounting to rupees 22 lakhs in the question, it comes to 81.81%, mean total 81% of the fixed assets of the company are financed from the long term resources of the company. Thank you for your kind attention. I hope now you know how to solve the practical problems related to the various solvency ratios.